Welcome to CSP 383, Chapter 8, Societal, Family, and Multicultural Characteristics. Where we begin is with societal characteristics, individual rights. So a person has a right to have a normalized life. They have a right to have consent for the things that they're being asked to do in their life. They have the right to be considered competent, and they have the right to have guardianship if they're not competent. So let's start with normalization. Nerja, who was a researcher in Scandinavia, came up with the idea of 8 planks of normalization. So 8 things that are necessary for a person to be able to live a life the way you live your life. So the first plank is that normalization means a normal rhythm of the day, that you get up at a particular time, that you have tasks that are predictable, that you have your meals at a regular time, and that all of this normal rhythm of the day is determined by you, not by external forces. Normalization implies a normal routine of life, that from week to week, from month to month, from year to year, there are things that you do that are part of your life. And again, these are things that you decided to do. Normalization means a normal rhythm of the year. So this means that in a particular year, we have holidays, we have work seasons, and we have break seasons. So a person with a disability has the right to have a Christmas holiday, just like everyone else has a Christmas holiday. A person with a disability has the right to have a day of rest on Sunday, a day of leisure on Saturday. Normalization calls for normal developmental experiences, the life cycle. So we're talking about here that when you are in your teens, you spend time with peers, both same sex and opposite sex peers. When you're a young adult, you go to social settings and you have a work experience where you have a job. You go live out on your own. You may even have children. You may even marry. Normalization calls for the valuing of individual choices. I choose to live in a house. You may choose to live in an apartment, would be an example of that. I choose to live in a small town. You may choose to live in the city. Normalization means living in a bisexual world. And by this, we don't mean where people are bisexual the way we think of it today. Keep in mind, this was written in the 70s. But the idea that as a female, I'm going to have friends who are female and I'm going to have friends who are male. That just because I'm female doesn't mean that my entire life has to be with females. Normalization calls for living, learning, and recreating in facilities similar to those that others in the community enjoy. So if I have a disability, and I may even be living in a facility, I may be living in a residential facility, but that means that I still should be able to go get my hair cut where other people get their hair cut. I should be able to go to the movies. Well, not in Cleveland. I should be able to, what do we do in Cleveland? Go to Lost Dog. I should be able to go out to eat. I should be able to go shopping. I should be able to go to Delta State football games, whatever it is that's part of what other people of my age and stage do. Normalization means applying normal economic standards. So if minimum wage is what somebody would get for doing janitorial work, then if I have a disability and I'm working as a janitor, I should also get minimum wage. So, I forgot to finish this slide. Let's go back to this slide. So other things that we look at when we look at individual rights is the right to consent. Now this is informed consent. So that means that not only do you have to have my permission before you place me in a setting or before you put me in a job, but it has to be informed consent. I have to understand what it is that you're asking me to consent to, what you're asking me that you want to do on my behalf. Competency has to do with whether I'm able to make decisions on my own. We cannot just say this person's not competent, so we're going to decide for them. You actually have to go to court to have someone's competency removed from them. Um, when this happens, the court will appoint what they call a guardian ad litem, and this guardian is someone who will make the decisions on behalf of the person with the disability. If the person is not declared incompetent, then they must be allowed to make decisions on their own behalf. Next thing we're going to look at is the criminal justice system. Here's what we find, and this is adapted, by the way, from the ARC, which is an advocacy organization for individuals with disabilities and their families. So here are some of the problems we have in the criminal justice system. When a person with a disability is accused of a crime, then they may try to cover up for their disability. They'd rather be considered guilty than to be considered, quote, retarded. They may pretend to understand even when they don't. They may not understand the commands and instructions that the police or the judge is presenting them. They may be overwhelmed by police presence or by the courtroom. They may be upset at being detained or try to run away, not because they're guilty, but because they feel uncomfortable in an unfamiliar setting. They may say what they think the officers or the court wants them to hear. They may have trouble describing the facts or detail of the offense. They may be the first to leave the scene of the crime and the first to get caught. Again, not necessarily because they did anything wrong, but because they don't know how to stand up for themselves. They may be confused about who's responsible for the crime and confess even though they're innocent. As victims, they may be easily victimized and targeted because of their lack of social sophistication. They're less likely or able to report a crime. They may be easily influenced and eager to please. They may not realize that victimization is a crime. So in other words, people can do all kinds of horrible things to them and they don't realize that it's actually against the law. They may think that the perpetrator is a friend. You think about, if I don't have very many friends, then if someone is kind to me in some ways, I may actually allow them to do things they shouldn't do. They may be unaware of how serious or dangerous the situation is. They may not be considered a credible witness, and they have few ways to get help, to get to a safe place, or to obtain services. So now we talk about levels of support, and what we're talking about here is that as an adult with a disability, what are my expectations of what kind of help that I can get? So the first thing we look at is what we call support levels. And so the types of levels that someone can get, the first are what are called intermittent supports. So what this means is that I can get support on an as-needed basis, and these kinds of supports are episodic, in other words, episode by episode, and they also are short term. So an example of this would be, let's say I lose my job and I need a new job. And so I found a new job, but now I need some support in learning the ways of the world in that new job. That would be intermittent support. The next is limited support. This is more consistent over time, but not intensive over a long period. So it may be that if I was working at Kroger and then I got a job at Val's, then I would only need intermittent support because grocery stores are grocery stores. But let's say instead I had been working at Kroger and I got a job working with the City Park Commission doing landscaping. I would need limited support because I may need support over a period of months to learn a job that's completely different from the job I had before. Extensive support is regular involvement in one or more environments, and this is long term. So as an example of that, let's say that I don't understand money, and so I may need somebody to work with me on my budget over my lifespan. So over a long period of time, and in that one particular area. Pervasive support is high intensity, constant provision over the long term in almost all environments. And so what we're talking about here is I am in a wheelchair, and I am going to need assistance in mobility. I also have problems with communication, and so I'm going to have problems with being able to communicate with people consistently. And so I may actually have a health aide that goes with me everywhere that I go. So the next thing we look at is the idea of person-centered planning. So when we look at person-centered planning, here's what we find, is we want to look in the middle here at the person's values, relationships, places, valued roles and choices, and contributions. So in other words, based on what this person and their family think is most important, then what are the things that we're going to need to do to help plan for this person over their lifespan? So the first thing that we're going to look at is getting to know people. We want to build a relationship with the person and with their family so that they trust us and that we understand them and that they understand us. The next thing we're going to do is find capacities. What we're going to do is do a personal profile of the person's values and their skills. And then we're going to find opportunities in community life. So we're going to do what's called a community building map. We're going to look at what the opportunities are in this community based on the values that this person has and the interests and the skills they have. Then we're going to create a vision for the future. Where's this person going to be 5 years from now? And what are the things that are going to be important to them now? Then we're going to support people over time and to take action and to try things. So we're going to have follow-along meetings to help this person reach this vision they have, get to where they need to be 5 years from now, and then we can look 10 years from now. And then organizational change and constructive support, system support. So we're going to have platforms for change so that the services in that community can rise up to meet the needs, not just in this individual's vision of the future, but also other people who have disabilities and what their vision is. So this is part 1 of chapter 8, and I will also be posting a part 2 of chapter 8.